Well, at 8:26 a.m., we continue with the broadcast this morning on News and Views right here on Salam Media. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show. We trust and hope that with a brand new week, that you are going to have a wonderful week ahead, inshallah. But right now, we're going across to be joined by senior researcher at AFRASID. We're talking with Ibrahim Thembisa Fakude. And this comes on March the 10th. Saudi Arabia and Iran announced an agreement to restore bilateral relations. Now, is this good news? Is it not? And this deal was had taken place in China, and this is where we've seen both the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Shamkhani, and the Minister of State of Saudi Arabia, Mus'ad bin Mohammed Al Aban, taking a picture and with a Chinese diplomat when this bilateral agreement was announced. And right now, we're going across to be joined by none other than Ibrahim Thembisa Fakude. Ibrahim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan so much for your time.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Yes, interesting developments. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and there's just so much taking place, considering this deep hatred that Saudi Arabia and Iran has had, for many many years, a very very long time, to the extent that we've seen an entire country in the form of Yemen that was destroyed.
Yes, it was an interesting meeting, but most importantly, it's interesting of who has organized this meeting, which is China. China has not been known to be involved in the Middle East in terms of its foreign policy. I mean, not as much as the United States was involved, but what we see now, we see China coming in and entrenching itself. So it's going to be very, very interesting. A lot of people are going to be disappointed, particularly Israel, that was betting or has been betting all along on the schism between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been an informal alliance of Israel because of their common enemy, which was Iran. So now that things are changing, I think Israel is going to be the one losing in this regard.
Yes, and also it's clear that the conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia has been extremely costly in more ways than one. It has been toxic to both the nations as well. And looking at where both these countries have actually come from, and now that they are talking about normalizing diplomatic relations, but I'm sure there are still many many issues that need to be ironed out, because there would still be a lot of mistrust between the two nations that they need to resolve.
Yeah, but the other thing which this relationship has done, it has further widened um, the the division or hatred between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims in the region, because Saudi Arabia has always accused Iran of Shia expansionism, whether it was in Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria, and in Bahrain as well. So now what we see happening is that they are reconciling, but I can bet you that they're not going to do the job on the ground in terms of fostering reconciliation within the people that have started hating each other because of the leaders of the region who have been saying all sorts of things against Iran. And as a result, there is a Shia phobia, for lack of a better word, in the Middle East. In fact, I've argued in some spaces that Sunni Muslims, particularly in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, they hate the Iran or Shia Iran more than they hate the Jews. In fact, some of them equate their hatred to that of the Yahudi. I'm not saying we should hate the Yahudi. I understand very clearly the war is against the Zionists in Israel, but I'm just trying to paint a picture on where we are in terms of the ground, the relationship between the Sunni and the Shia on the ground. So while this is going to be happening at that level, which is good, alhamdulillah, however, I think there has to be other measures, concerted effort on ensuring that there is a reconciliation between the people, particularly in the Middle East of Iran and Saudi Arabia in particular, and other countries that have been impacted by Iran, particularly people of Syria. You know that Iran and Russia has been involved in destroying that country. And also in Yemen, as you correctly said, Iran and Yemen has also created the havoc that we see at the moment. In Lebanon people continue to blame Iran for bolstering Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is accused of running a parallel government. So those efforts, to an extent, I think these two governments will have to work very hard in ensuring that at least the people are taken with as they continue negotiating these new settlements between themselves.
Yes, and also, Ibrahim, it is clear that there has been a lot of foreign influence on what has been playing out between Iran and Saudi Arabia over the years, looking at the United States in particular, looking at other Western nations, and also their support for Israel and looking at Israel and strengthening Israel's position in the Middle East. But at the same time, was what has been playing out between the United States and China now being at the forefront and taking center stage of this initiative. Now, where would this leave a country like Saudi Arabia, especially in terms of its relationship with the likes of the United States of America, with Western nations that have supported, that have provided arms to Saudi Arabia against Iran, and also at the same time on all the devastation and destruction that had taken place in Yemen, for example?
Well, that's why I'm saying that this reconciliation will impact on governments and leadership of the region. But I'm not quite sure whether it's going to be that instant in terms of impacting change within the ground. Iran has not been very constructive in the Middle East, whether it's in Lebanon, as I've said, or Yemen or Syria. And there is a move now to normalize, for example, Bashar al-Assad, a butcher of his own people. And he was supported for a very long time by Iran. So it's going to be very difficult to convince the people in the Middle East that Iran should be once again integrated and be part of the politics of the region, notwithstanding what Iran is continuing to do, particularly in Syria. We saw what happened after the devastating earthquakes in the southern part of Syria and northern part of Syria and the southern part of Turkey. It continues to be a problem. We've seen how many refugees are there. And so people are very wary of what's going on. Moreover, these moves are initiated by people that are not necessarily well accepted in the region. Mohammed bin Salman remains one of the leaders that have created a lot of havoc within the region. I take the point that, all of us are kind of comforted that the United States, which has been a long-standing support of Israel, is now going to be, or at least it appears that China is appearing, is replacing the United States. But China itself continues to be a problem in Xinjiang province, where Muslims are kept in detention camps and Muslims are killed on a daily basis and arrested. And their efforts of trying to indoctrinate Muslims and train them out of Islam. So China is not really, as well, the best arbiter at the moment, given its own atrocity against Muslims in Xinjiang. So we'll have to wait and see how this is going to turn up. But as I've said, I think it's going to work for the leaders and it's going to work for China as a broker. But whether this reconciliation will filter down to the ground as soon as they expect, I don't think it's going to be the case. I think there's a much more deeper hatred between the people that have been fighting for a long time, particularly in Yemen. And if you're going to leave it like that and expect that the reconciliation at the top will assist reconciling the people, I think it's just a pipe dream. In Syria, for example, the position of the Syrians, particularly the Sunni Muslims in Syria, who've been openly cleansed off from their country by countries such as Russia and Iran, if there are no efforts to try and convince them that it's the right thing to do to reconcile with Iran, I think, again, these initiatives will pipe dream. I know a lot of people forget the role of Russia, for example, now that we deal with Ukraine. that Russia is one of those countries that have been engaged in a scorched earth project in Syria. It has killed a lot of our brothers and sisters, particularly Sunni Muslims in Syria. And now it's easy for us to speak and defend them in Ukraine because they are on the side of or against the United States. But they've committed crimes in the Middle East, including Iran. It continues to create crimes in the Middle East, and it created havoc in Syria in particular. So we also need to be very careful on, our position must always be informed in terms of where we sit in this conflict and in these reconciliations led by people that have not been known for supporting the basic rights, Mohammed bin Salman, or whether it's Ibrahim Raisi or Mr. Vladimir Putin. These are people who have been very destructive, particularly to Islamic cause.
Exactly, and I think you make a very, very important and make a valid point. And again, looking at how this is likely to impact on the geopolitics of the region, where we know Saudi Arabia turn its back on the United States of America? Will it switch alliances? Because we know it is very highly dependent on the United States for military, air, and also looking at it from an economic perspective. On the other hand, Iran has got this close relationship that it has built together with the likes of Russia and China. So, all of this, these are interesting developments to see, how this actually impacts on some of the global powers as well.
Yes, that's very true, and I think what they're trying to do, which is correct, of course. I mean, if the United States is replaced, it will ease the strain in the Middle East in terms of negotiations because their blind support of Israel has been a problem. But we are seeing now young Americans questioning their blind support of Israel, particularly liberal Jews in America were saying, why must America continue supporting the country that is openly violating basic rights and continue to create mayhem in various places in Palestine, particularly with the recent raids in the West Bank. So I think it will give new politics in the Middle East a chance if China comes in. The only thing, of course, we've seen how China's involvement can also impact on instability, particularly in Africa with its economic policy. See no evil, hear no evil. They've come into Africa, empowered a lot of dictators in Africa through business and economics, and they've not asked questions in terms of things that people want, particularly freedoms that all of us cherish. So I think also going to the Middle East, we might see that happening. We might see them getting involved and opening up opportunities because China's foreign policy is basically economics. Belt Road Initiative is about expanding, extending the railway line across Asia into, from east to west Asia and increasing its business. So China's Belt Road Initiative is about good neighborliness. And some people have argued that this has got a lot to do with that. It has to go through certain countries in the Middle East as it continues and expands its business in terms of resuscitating the old Silk Route. And it needs these countries somehow and to have peace to an extent with these countries. So it's business for them. And I think it's going to be the same thing of see no evil, hear no evil.
Well, Ibrahim, let's see what develops. These are still early days, but as always, we appreciate your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Senior researcher at AFRASID, Ibrahim Thembisa Fakude, with us this morning. A quick break, and we come back. We'll be joined by the ATM national spokesperson, Zama and Shona. We're talking about the leaked preliminary Pala Pala report.